There is a point in your spiritual journey where the light starts to dim, not because you've done something wrong, but because you've unknowingly arrived at the entrance of a much deeper layer of your awakening. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or divine downloads. It doesn't feel like illumination or alignment. It feels more like confusion, disorientation, and a strange, persistent silence that no mantra or meditation seems to break. People don't talk about this phase often because it doesn't fit the narrative of love and light, of manifesting high vibes and healing crystals. But this is where the real initiation begins. You may have felt it already. That quiet unraveling that doesn't come with a breakdown, but with a slow, internal erosion. You start questioning things you once held sacred. The practices that used to uplift you now feel empty. The teachers you once revered now sound hollow. Even your own voice, your affirmations, your wisdom, your certainty begins to sound foreign in your own mind. And you wonder, am I regressing? Am I broken? Did I take a wrong turn? But no, this is the beginning of something ancient and real. This is the first hidden sign you're not losing your way. You're entering a deeper one. The light is not gone. It's gone inside you. And to find it again, you must walk through the dark. The second sign is even more disorienting. You begin to lose your desire for progress, not just in spiritual terms, but in life. The goals you once chased, spiritual mastery, inner peace, clarity, transcendence, begin to feel meaningless. You stop caring about being high vibe. You stop caring about being understood. You even stop caring about healing. And this terrifies you. Because every part of your identity was built around effort, around moving forward, around growth. But what's happening here isn't stagnation. It's surrender. It's your soul asking you to stop climbing and start descending. Because not all spiritual evolution looks like expansion. Sometimes it looks like implosion, like a collapse of the false self, like death. And death doesn't move upward, it pulls you inward, into the unknown. Then comes the third sign. Your reality begins to distort, not in a psychedelic way, but in the way you see through illusions you didn't even know were illusions. You start noticing how much of your life was built on performance, how you acted spiritual rather than being it. You see the spiritual ego in others, but more painfully, in yourself. You recognize how your need to be enlightened was really just a deeper desire to be safe, to be validated, to be in control. And when that veil lifts, it doesn't feel empowering. It feels humiliating. But this is sacred, because real awakening doesn't flatter your identity, it strips it. And in this stripping, you begin to feel raw, exposed, uncertain. This is not a mistake. This is purification through fire. The fourth sign is isolation, but not the kind that you choose. It's the kind that chooses you. You might still be surrounded by people, but you feel like you're disappearing. Conversations no longer touch you. Relationships begin to dissolve, not in dramatic explosions, but in quiet and mutual fading. You feel invisible, even to yourself. And in that invisibility, you begin to wonder if you ever truly existed at all. But this is the sacred withdrawal. The soul pulling back into the cocoon, not to hide, but to regenerate. To remember itself without the noise of the world. So if you feel like nobody sees you, if you feel like you're vanishing, trust that this is not the end. It's a sacred pause before you re-emerge as something truer, deeper, more aligned with who you really are. The fifth sign is emotional chaos, but not the kind you can name. It's not just sadness or anger or fear. It's an energetic turbulence that floods your system without a clear source. You wake up heavy for no reason. You cry without a story. You feel rage, grief, emptiness, all flickering in and out like static, and no amount of self-analysis seems to explain it. That's because you're not processing personal emotions. You're purging collective and ancestral energy. You're becoming a vessel for deeper healing, not just for yourself, but for your lineage, for the archetypes you carry, for the collective unconscious. And this kind of purging can't be neatly packaged into a self-help framework. It requires deep stillness, deep breath, and the willingness to feel it all without labeling it. The sixth sign is the collapse of meaning. Words like purpose, destiny, calling, they begin to dissolve. You can't find a reason for anything anymore. Not because life is meaningless, but because you're outgrowing the kind of meaning that gives you comfort. You're shedding the narratives, all of them, even the spiritual ones, because your soul no longer needs a story to hold on to. It needs silence, stillness, space. And in that space, a deeper kind of meaning starts to emerge, not from the mind, but from the marrow. Not from control, but from communion with the unknown. And then comes the seventh sign, the most hidden, the most sacred, a subtle, inexplicable longing. It's not for love or peace or clarity. It's for truth, the raw, unfiltered, terrifying, beautiful truth of existence. You begin to crave it more than comfort, more than security, more than happiness. And that craving is a sign that your soul is waking up beneath the noise. It's a hunger that nothing external can satisfy. Only the divine, only the mystery, only that which cannot be named. So if you're in this space, if any of this resonates, know this: you're not broken. You're not lost. You're not doing it wrong. You're entering a dark spiritual awakening mode. Not dark as in evil, dark as in deep, as in root, as in womb, as in the place where stars are born. But now I ask you, can you stay in the dark long enough to see what only darkness reveals? Can you let go of the need to be seen, understood, or even healed, and simply endure a great undoing?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
There is a sacred intelligence behind collapse. Most people fear it. Most see it as failure, as defeat, as something to escape. But those who have walked through the fire and didn't run from it know the deeper truth. Breakdown is not the opposite of breakthrough. It is the breakthrough. It's just wearing the costume of destruction. It's not here to destroy your life, but to dismantle the illusions that have kept you from truly living. And that's the paradox. In the beginning, the breakdown feels like everything is being taken away from you. But in time, you realize it's actually returning you to yourself. When you start to lose everything you thought was you, your beliefs, your ambitions, your relationships, your identity, you're not being punished. You're being purified. You're being reminded that none of those things were really you. They were garments, stories, structures you inherited or constructed to survive. But survival is not the same as living. And the soul, when it's ready to evolve, will begin to shake the foundation of everything that stands between you and your truth. So when the mind starts spinning, when your heart breaks open, when the ground beneath you begins to give way, pause. Don't rush to rebuild. Don't try to fix it. Let it fall. Let it crumble. Because sometimes we need to be emptied before we can be filled. The sacred breakdown often begins in silence. You withdraw not because you're avoiding life, but because life as you knew it no longer fits. You stop chasing answers because none of them satisfy the questions now blooming inside you. You stop chasing people because your soul is asking for solitude. You stop chasing healing because you sense that true healing isn't something you allow. And in that stillness, a strange kind of grief arises. Not just for what you've lost, but for the version of you that believed you needed it all to be whole. That grief is holy. It is the funeral of your former self. But the ego hates funerals. It clings. It resists. It screams, fix this. Go back. Do something. And if you listen to that voice, you'll miss the sacred invitation being offered. Because beneath the grief is something even more terrifying: emptiness. A vast, unshaped space where nothing is certain, nothing is defined, and nothing feels safe. Most people run from that space their whole lives. They fill it with noise, with plans, with identities, with distractions. But if you can sit in that emptiness without trying to escape, if you can breathe into it without rushing to make sense of it, you'll begin to feel something ancient stirring beneath the surface. That is presence. That is awareness without armor. That is you without the mask, without the posture, without the performance. And it's in that raw, open state that the real awakening begins, because you're no longer trying to become someone, achieve something. or reach somewhere. You're simply being. And from that place of stillness, a deeper knowing starts to emerge, not from your mind, but from your essence. You begin to remember that you are not your thoughts, your roles, your traumas, or your triumphs. You are the one who witnesses all of that. You are the space in which everything arises and dissolves. You are the awareness behind the breakdown. And that awareness, it has never been broken. This is the sacred irony. Everything you thought was, you must break so that the truth of you can rise. Not a better version, not a healed version, but the real one, the one that was never lost, never damaged, never separate to begin with. And once you touch that space, even for a moment, you'll never see yourself or the world the same way again. You'll realize that all the chaos was part of the choreography, that the darkness wasn't blocking your light, it was birthing it, that the breakdown wasn't an end, it was an initiation, a rite of passage into the deepest, rawest, most honest version of your soul. But let me ask you something now, and I want you to sit with this deeply. What part of your identity are you still clinging to, even as it burns in your hands? What stories do you keep telling yourself about who you are, even though they no longer feel true? Because the longer you hold on to what wants to die, the longer you delay the life that's waiting to be born. So if you're walking through the ruins of your former self right now, don't rush to rebuild. Don't try to make sense of it too soon. Let the sacred breakdown do its work. Let it strip you. Let it silence you. Let it hollow you out so deeply that only truth remains. Because on the other side of that sacred devastation is something no one can give you and nothing can take away: yourself. There is a strange and sacred space that comes after the breakdown, but before the breakthrough. It's not often spoken of because it's not glamorous, not poetic, not easily explained. It's quiet. It's empty. It's full of paradox. This is the threshold of no return, the liminal space between the self you've shed and the self you've not yet stepped into. You're no longer who you were, but you're not quite who you're becoming. It feels like floating in a cosmic in-between, like standing at the edge of a cliff with no map, no direction, no guarantee of what comes next. And yet something in you knows you can't go back. Not because you're being forced forward, but because the soul has already outgrown the old container. The skin no longer fits. The mask no longer sticks. The echo of your old identity rings hollow. And so you stand in this void, naked, unsure, and deeply alive. This space is sacred not because it feels good, but because it reveals truth in its rawest form. In the void, all your distractions fall away. You see what you really value. You see how much of your life was built around avoiding this very feeling of uncertainty. You see how addicted you were to structure, to knowing, to control. And now, with all of that stripped, you're left with only one question: can I trust what I cannot see? This is where the dark spiritual awakening deepens, not in the dramatic collapse, but in the silent pause that follows. It's not the storm that tests you, it's the stillness after the storm, when nothing moves and yet everything inside you is changing. The threshold is not a place of answers. It is a place of listening. And the longer you can stay here without rushing to fill the silence, the more you begin to hear your soul whispering truths that were buried under years of noise. You begin to sense who you're becoming, not in the form of a clear plan or identity, but as a subtle resonance, a vibration, a frequency, something that feels like home, even if you don't have words for it yet. And this stage, this in-between, is where most people turn around. The discomfort becomes too much, the uncertainty too unbearable. So they go back to the familiar, even if it suffocates them. But if you can stay, if you can hold the line, if you can learn to breathe in the void, something miraculous begins to unfold. You start to realize that this emptiness is not a punishment, it's preparation. The universe is not withholding clarity from you, it's clearing space for a deeper truth to emerge. But here's the catch: that truth will not come through your mind. It will not arrive as a concept. It will arrive as embodiment, as presence, as a quiet knowing that bypasses logic and lands directly in your bones. And when it does, you will feel it not as a rush of excitement, but as a deep exhale, a settling, a remembering. In this space, you begin to reclaim your sovereignty. You stop outsourcing your truth. You stop looking for signs, symbols, or synchronicities to tell you who you are. You start listening inward. You start trusting your body, your intuition, your inner compass. And slowly, the fear that once haunted you begins to dissolve. Not because the unknown becomes known, but because you no longer need it to be. You've made peace with mystery. You've befriended the void. And from that place, your next becoming finds you not as an identity to wear, but as a truth to inhabit. But let me ask you something now, and let it sink deep into the marrow of your being. What if the version of you that's coming doesn't look like anything you've imagined? What if it's not more spiritual, more successful, or more healed, but simply more you? Can you let go of even your highest vision of yourself to make space for what your soul truly wants to become? This threshold is not a test of strength. It's a test of surrender. It asks, can you trust the becoming even when you don't recognize the becoming? It asks you to walk forward with no guarantee, no outcome, no reward, only the pull of something ancient inside you that says, this is the way. And if you can do that, if you can let yourself dissolve without needing to be rebuilt right away, then what you will find on the other side is not just a new self, but a new way of being. A new relationship with life. One that doesn't require certainty to feel safe. One that doesn't need validation to feel real. One that doesn't need to be seen to know it exists. Because now you exist not as a performance, not as a projection, but as presence, as awareness. As the silent witness who has walked through the fire, stood in the void, and emerged not with all the answers, but with something far more valuable, the unshakable knowing that you are enough, even in the not knowing. When you finally emerge from the threshold, it's not with fanfare or fireworks. There is no grand applause waiting for you, no spiritual trophy handed out for surviving the void. What returns is not a new version of you that's shinier, more enlightened, or invincible. What returns is the real, the raw, the quiet truth that was always there beneath the noise. You don't come back to life as someone else, you come back as someone true. And the moment you begin to rebuild from that space, everything changes. Not overnight, not dramatically, but with a steady, grounded aliveness that no longer needs to prove anything. The performance is gone. The mask has melted. What's left is essence. And that is where real power lives. Rebuilding after a dark spiritual awakening is not about reclaiming your old ambitions or chasing the same dreams with a new mindset. It's about asking yourself with radical honesty, what still feels true? What actually matters to me now? You'll find that many things you used to cling to, titles, approval, the need to be understood, have lost their grip on you. They no longer resonate. They feel like echoes from a previous life. And in their absence, a new kind of clarity begins to rise. One that isn't loud but deeply certain. You start choosing differently. You speak with fewer words but more truth. You move slower but with greater intention. You no longer act from urgency but from alignment. And then something unexpected happens. You begin to attract what reflects your new frequency. Not because you're manifesting harder, but because you become honest about what you're available for. People change around you. Some leave. Some draw closer. But the ones who remain feel like mirrors, not masks. Your relationships begin to deepen not through shared beliefs, but through shared presence. You don't need to be spiritual together. You just need to be real. And that realness creates a bond stronger than any ritual or philosophy. It creates intimacy. It creates trust. You also begin to understand that healing was never about becoming perfect. It was about becoming whole. And wholeness means integration, not rejecting your darkness, not denying your fear, not bypassing your anger, but learning to carry all of it with grace. You stop seeing your emotions as problems to fix and start seeing them as messengers to listen to. You stop trying to be high vibrational all the time, and instead you become deeply available to life, even the uncomfortable parts, especially the uncomfortable parts, because now you know that real spirituality isn't about escaping the human experience, it's about inhabiting it fully. This is what it means to return from the fire. You're not above life. You're in it, rooted, present, awake. Not in a mystical, detached way, but in a grounded, embodied way. You can laugh again. You can cry without analyzing. You can sit in silence without needing it to be profound. You can have a conversation without performing depth. Because you're no longer trying to be spiritual. You just are. Because now you know, spirituality isn't something separate from your humanity. It's the quiet thread that weaves through every ordinary moment and makes it sacred. But let me ask you this. One last time, what are you willing to release so that your life can finally reflect your truth? What are you still pretending to care about, even though your soul has outgrown it? Because the return of the real doesn't happen all at once. It happens every time you choose truth over image, presence over perfection, integrity over performance. This is the gift of the dark spiritual awakening. It strips you down, not to harm you, but to show you what's real. And once you've seen what's real, you can never go back to pretending. You'll build slowly. You'll build differently. But you'll build from truth. And that truth will anchor everything you touch. Not just your spiritual life, but your work, your relationships, your creativity, your presence in the world. You've walked through the dark. You've stood in the void. And now you return not as someone better, but as someone true. That is the real awakening. And it's only the beginning.